Terenzio, a character from the opening scene, hurries into a Brussels airport. He appears to be in a panic and is rushing. Although the majority of people would assume he is missing a flight, the reality is very different. He inquires about a ticket to the west at the help desk but is informed that the closest one is 2 hours away. Even yet, he purchases the ticket only to get across the terminal. Inez, a well-known influencer, is video chatting with a friend in New York at the same airport when all of a sudden she chokes and loses consciousness. Inez feels concerned, especially because she is unable to assist her. Those outside who are watching television can see that the live show hosts and TV reporters have fallen asleep in front of the camera. Not only that, but there are also numerous unconscious folks sprawled out on a street. With the exception of Terenzio, who is aware of the situation, the viewers assume it must be some sort of comedy. He rushes to the terminal after declaring that it is time to take action. Terenzio grabs a guard's gun as he loses focus and motions for everyone to move aside. He scrambles to catch a plane to Moscow that is about to take departure. When he enters the aircraft, only a few people have seated themselves, and he holds everyone at gunpoint. Matthew, the co-pilot, is unwilling to aid the terrorist because the pilot is missing. A bullet wounds Matthew as they struggle for the gun and strikes Matthew in the palm. The passengers become anxious outside, and flight attendant Gabrielle tries to calm them down. Terenzio asks if there is a pilot on board as he exits the cockpit. Even though she is simply a retired chopper pilot, Sylvie gets up. She and Matthew board the aircraft with the other passengers at Terenzio's command. The bullet has damaged the avionics, making it impossible for anyone inside the plane to communicate with anyone outside. After the plane is in the air, Sylvie and Matthew make every effort to persuade Terenzio, but he is steadfast in his position. He claims to be a NATO officer who has inside knowledge that they don't. He admits that the sun's rays have turned deadly when prodded. The dawn will kill everyone starting the following morning, even those who stay indoors. If the sunlight catches up with them, the plane will be the next target. This has already begun in Eastern nations like Japan and Korea. He is not believed by Matthew and Sylvie, who suspect that he is psychologically ill. Terenzio admits that he might come across as foolish, but insists that he is not. The severe bleeding in Matthew's hand could eventually become problematic. Laura, one of the travelers, cares for an elderly man with dementia in his house. Since she is the sole medical expert aboard, she accepts responsibility for assisting the pilot. They use a heated knife instead of a sewing kit to close the incision. The more Matthew yells in pain, the more anxious the passengers become. Matthew is aware that everyone's lives are at jeopardy if they start to protest. He therefore informs them that they will land somewhere at Terenzio's request before making their way to the actual destination. As they were seized at gunpoint, Matthew hopes that the fighter jets are there to save them. Sylvie, though, feels alone for some unknown reason. Ayas, a passenger, overheard them discussing the sun and believes the pilot is deceiving them. An Arab traveler suddenly starts coughing and loses consciousness. Ayaz poses as his aide while stealing Terenzio's rifle in the process. Ayaz orders Terenzio to be locked in the restroom, and Matthew is urged to be honest. The pilot explains that Terenzio requested a westward destination, which is why they are landing in Iceland. The terrorist will be taken into custody by the local police, and the other suspects will be released. Also, he informs them of Terenzio's belief that the sun will kill humanity. The passengers become enraged as a result. They begin remembering odd events that occurred prior to boarding the trip and become concerned for their family. Matthew reassures everyone and accepts the captain's role in saving them all. He attempts to arrive in an Icelandic airport sometime later but receives no signal from traffic control. They realize numerous airplanes have collided and that people are scurrying around when they can get a good look at the ground. They finally realize Terenzio was telling the truth, but they are unable to land due to the runway being obstructed. The captain decides to take this risk because the aircraft only has enough fuel to make it to Scotland by heading a little west. Terenzio is brought out of the bathroom so he may explain what is happening to everyone. He admits that he overheard his seniors discussing the sun and learned about it from them. He has no idea why it is taking place or when it will end. He just knows that they must flee from the sunrise if they are to survive. The Arab man who collapsed earlier is still on the ground. He is having trouble breathing and is on the verge of cardiac arrest. He claims that during his final breaths, he ingested diamonds. Laura, a nurse, does everything she can to save him, but it is in vain. Matthew saves the aircraft from colliding with a wall during an emergency landing in Scotland at the same time. As soon as they step outside, notifications from their loved ones begin to chime on their phones. There are numerous articles regarding harmful sunshine on the internet. The other half of the world is still alive but will soon pass away. The airport is deserted since everyone who had the chance to flee has done so, and the remaining people are hiding in shadowy areas in the hopes that it would keep them safe. But according to the news, fatalities are occurring even within bunkers. 3 RAF troops approach them abruptly and ask for assistance. They decide to gather necessary supplies and fly west because they only have 45 minutes till daybreak. Jacob, an engineer for an aircraft, is one of the travelers. He wants to save his pregnant wife by returning to her, but he is urged to leave so that everyone on board can remain safe. They take off again after gathering supplies and refueling the aircraft. They are advised to fly away from the equator by one of the guys who is a pilot in order to avoid the sun catching up to them more quickly. Canada is their next destination, where they will refuel the aircraft and mend the radio. Their phones start to chime after the internet is restored. In Brussels, they get the final notes from loved ones who have passed away. Suddenly, a man comes across a report that claims the polarity of the sun is what caused the catastrophe. Horst, a different traveler, is an expert in climate and is familiar with the concept of solar polarity. He explains that the sun's magnetic field reverses every 11 years, but nobody is sure why. There hasn't been much research done on it because it doesn't significantly affect the world. The strength of the reversal, however, has been waning during the last few decades. Horst believes that as a result, the reversal gained considerable strength in the opposite direction. If what he claims is accurate, people are dying suddenly because the world is being bombarded with gamma rays everywhere the sun shines. As the scientists who wrote the essay are almost certainly all deceased, they lack the means to support the theory. Ayaz then learns from a news article that the RAF troops they chose were actually Afghan insurgents. At the airport, they had been detained and were being sent home. One of them fights with the elderly man with dementia outside and pushes him. He dies as a result, and the terrorist receives the passenger's condemnation. When Matthew and Sylvie discuss the news report, they decide to leave the terrorists behind when they arrive in Canada. They touch down a little while later, with 2 hours until daybreak. Throughout the city, a number of victims of the sun are lying in wait. The terrorists are instructed to search the nearby store for replacement radio parts. Although they consent, they insist on bringing Gabrielle and Jacob along. The issue is that Gabrielle is unaware of the plot, whereas Jacob is. Gabrielle declines to accompany Jacob when he locks the terrorists in a room while they are in the store because of this. Jacob makes an immediate effort to persuade her. He eventually makes it to the airport despite the terrorists pursuing him. But Gabrielle is left behind in the city. Without her, the plane takes off. After that, the terrorists are able to fire a shot through a window. Thankfully for the passengers, it merely causes a crack. As long as they keep their altitude level, it won't actually shatter. On the flight is a young Dominic who has a terminal illness. Ayaz tries to speak with him, but his mother is overly protective. Zara requests that the man leave. They unexpectedly receive a radio signal from Hawaii. The talk is cut short, but they surmise that some survivors are still alive because they are staying in an underwater bunker. Sylvie believes it would be foolish for Matthew to travel to Hawaii because of an unclear message, despite his desire to leave as quickly as possible. Terenzio, meantime, is indignant that the captain has complete discretion. He objects, and everyone decides that going forward, they will vote to make decisions. A malfunctioning airplane is indicated by multiple simultaneous alarms that ring just as things are beginning to calm down. Matthew discovers after investigating the issues that one of the terrorists who had been pursuing the aircraft earlier had fastened himself to the landing gear. They won't be able to land if he stays put. Thus, Matthew makes the decision to soar as far as he can so that the heat and lack of oxygen will bring him down. He neglects to take into account the broken window, though. It fractures as a result of the pressure difference, generating havoc inside the aircraft. The passengers prepare for impact as things fly into the sky. Jacob temporarily covers the window with a wooden board while Matthew immediately lowers the plane's altitude. Everyone settles down except for Dominic, whose respiratory tube blew away and is having problems breathing. Ayaz devises a strategy and constructs a breathing tube out of the oxygen pipe. Zara is appreciative and remorseful of her prior maltreatment of Ayaz, because they would never get it there on time at this altitude. The captain informs everyone that Hawaii is no longer a possibility. Landing on the Alaskan island of Itu would be the most practical course of action. Furthermore, the terrorist who was dangling didn't escape the turbulence. To see him, Ayaz, Jacob, and Terenzio walk to the undercarriage and drill a hole in the plane's floor. When Terenzio points his gun into the shadows, the criminal pulls it, nearly killing him. Fortunately, Ayaz intervenes and kills the terrorist. Before the passengers learn that he was the cause of the Arab passenger's death, he briefly assumes the role of their hero. A man who witnessed Ayaz hack into his stomach witnessed the burial of his remains back in Canada. Ayaz admits that he was transporting diamonds from Brussels to Moscow as a con artist. The Arab man agreed to have the diamonds placed inside of him, but he perished because he disobeyed the panicking instructions. Some passengers object that Ayaz should be left behind like the terrorists after hearing the confession, but the vote ultimately goes in Ayaz's favor. He is now restrained in the avionics bay. They land in Alaska in the next scene, fill the tank once again, and then take off. Horst, a climatologist, finds something peculiar while in the air. The grapes they brought back from Canada taste flavorless. He surmises that the atomic structure of the meal is being altered by the gamma ray's extreme intensity. The fact that it lessens the food's nutritional value is the element that worries me the most. They will starve to death in a few weeks if this continues. Although Matthew realizes the danger, he asserts that their main focus should be escaping the sun. In the last few hours, he has started to lose control of himself. When Sylvie asks him to rest, he yells at her instead, which is not like him. He will be dragged from the cockpit after being coerced into taking a nap by the other passengers. Matthew vows to sleep for the next few hours despite his annoyance. Later, they tune into another station on the radio and overhear two people conversing. Yet, all the gang can hear them say is Star 17. They quickly realize that the person on the other end of the phone is a cosmonaut who is now in orbit. They are astounded that someone like him is still alive, but this also indicates that he is in communication with the Earth-based control center. They make the decision to travel to NATO's Brussels headquarters, where everything began, with newfound optimism for survival. They will have 4 hours till the sun rises in Brussels if things continue this way. Hence, with Terenzio's assistance, they might learn anything about the headquarters' hidden bunker. Laura discovers Matthew asleep in the restroom outside. It turns out that his palm's wound was infected and resulted in blood poisoning. He had been acting in this manner earlier for this reason. They must amputate the affected tissues in order to fix the situation. If they can go to a hospital, Laura says she can perform the surgery there. Sylvie, however, is unable to land the plane without Matthew. She is the closest thing the passengers have to a pilot, so they implore her, but she can only land a helicopter. Horst explains to her that everyone will perish if she doesn't take action. Sylvie is then forced to view a few videos on how to land an airplane. But when it comes time to complete the task, she becomes anxious. Everyone prepares for the worst when an aggressive turbulence strikes. The plane and the passengers make a rocky landing in the end. But everything else goes smoothly. Everyone applauds Sylvie and takes pleasure in her accomplishment in the middle of the catastrophe. They split into 3 groups quickly to begin working on their various jobs. To refuel, 2 men remain at the airport, while Terenzio, Ayaz, and a man named Rick travel to the NATO headquarters. Zara, Laura, and her group transport Matthew to the closest hospital. They discover multiple dead bodies clogging passageways at the hospital. It appears that people learned of the killings before dawn and were attempting to save their lives. Laura commands everyone to put Matthew's safety ahead of the commotion. Zara packs her bags with medications for her son and the others at the same time. At NATO's main office, Terenzio takes them to the conference room where he first learned about the catastrophe. They don't have enough time to read through all the paperwork, so Rick decides to see whether the security footage has anything. Ayaz and Terenzio quarrel because Terenzio makes light of Ayaz's Turkish ancestry while he is abroad. He unintentionally strikes Ayaz, forcing him to lose consciousness and start bleeding profusely. Rick discovers a recording of the officials discussing a bunker beneath a dam in Bulgaria somewhere else. Star 17 is the location's name, which they had previously heard on the radio. Terenzio approaches him before he can return to the guys to inform him that Ayaz has already left. Rick looks at Ayaz's body on the TV, lying in a pool of blood, but he is too terrified to say anything. Everyone gets on the plane an hour before daybreak. Although Matthew is not in the best of health, the surgery has made him feel better. Terenzio informs everyone that Ayaz left before them, but they must now stop waiting for him to come back. They start the engines with heavy hearts when suddenly, a car stops in front of the aircraft, and Ayaz gets out. The next clip shows Terenzio being restrained in the avionics bay. Everyone is informed by Sylvie that they won't have enough fuel or time to reach another location if the Bulgaria plan fails. Everyone needs to be prepared when they land since they will only have 20 minutes to get to the bunker. When Ayaz had a seizure, he is in the bathroom. He believes it is because he has lost too much blood because it only lasts for a few seconds. He decides not to tell the others, though. He is asked what he intends to do with Terenzio when he steps outdoors. He lets the man accompany them to the bunker rather than putting him on death row. They eventually touch down in Bulgaria, dividing into 2 groups and traveling in 2 different cars. Ayaz operates the second vehicle while Sylvie pilots the first and leads the way. He experiences the seizure once more on the way, which causes them to crash. The lead automobile has already traveled a long distance, and the group is unable to catch up in the limited amount of time. Sylvie makes a right turn at a crossroads and arrives at a partially open gate. When a passenger tries to touch it, the electricity sends them flying. They discover that in order to keep the gate open, they must keep pressing a button. Terenzio volunteers to wait for the others while Sylvie and the gang enter the building as an atonement. Sylvie binds him to the stand before she leaves to ensure he won't desert them. It also affirms that he won't be available till the other group shows up. I, as in the group, however, make a left at the crossroads and arrive at a comparable gate from the opposite side of the dam. They scale the entrance using their clothing as a ladder, even though they left the bunker using several exits. They all eventually arrive at the entrance. Finally, military personnel welcome the travelers inside and reassure them of their safety. Terenzio is left outside on his own, pleading with God for mercy. He faces the rising sun and commands it to perform its best. He likewise perishes in the end. Watch the second episode of our new channel series recap to find out what happens to the remaining passengers next. I appreciate you viewing.